Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you're located in the world. And thank you for attending our webinar by HOCK International. Today, we have a great webinar for you. It's called Enrolled Agent Credential, Explore the Advantages and Career Prospects of Becoming an EA. My name is Jim Piaski, and I am Senior Business Development Director for HOCK International. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this event today. I'm going to give you a few housekeeping items, and then we'll go through the agenda for today before I introduce the speakers. So today, during this webinar, we have a very interactive session for you. If you have any questions or things that you'd like to share, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. You can type in your questions throughout the session, and we'll be able to answer them as we go along. We also have a special Q&A section at the end where we'll answer your questions. One of the most often questions that we get at the beginning is, will this be recorded and will this be sent to us? And the answer to both of those is yes. So we will record the session. We will share this presentation with you afterwards for everybody who has signed up. So please feel free to ask everything you can. We have some great experts with us today, and we'll be happy to answer those questions. So on our agenda today is a wonderful discussion with both Brian Hock and Christy Pinheiro. We'll go over what is the EA credential and who is it for. We'll look at the EA exam structure. We'll talk about some different study tools that are available. We'll look at the HOCK learning system, as well as the HOCK Passkey subscription model and a free trial that you can get by participating today. We'll talk about some success stories and then have some Q&A at the end. All right. Hopefully that is a good overview, and now we'll move on to our speakers. So our first speaker today will be Mr. Brian Hock. He is founder and president of HOCK International. Many of you know him from the different videos and looking at our website. Maybe you've met him in person. He has more than 25 years of experience in accounting, finance, and tax certifications and credentials, and we're happy to have Brian with us today. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you.
And our second speaker, Christy Pinheiro, is an EA and ABA. She is founder of Passkey Learning Systems. And Christy has phenomenal experience as well. More than 15 years as an EA and about 20 years working in tax. And so a lot of wonderful things. If anybody has seen Christy's videos, clearly one of the best teachers that we have, one of the best examples of EA in the industry, and super lucky to have her with us today. So welcome, Christy.
Hi, Jim's like really laying it on for me. Like, hello, everybody. I see your little updates, your little updates.
Yeah.
How you doing?
There you go. Get some love. Some
you got more of them now.
He's really like laying it on thick for me. But yeah, I have everybody. 20 years in tax right here. So the cracks are starting to show. But yeah, we're going to talk about the enrolled agent license today.
Great. So we're so happy to have both of you with us today. And Brian, I'm going to turn this over to you to get the webinar begun today.
Well, thank you, Jim, and welcome, Christy. It's great to be connected like this. As I say, there's a lot of experience between the two of us, but every once in a while, I do the math about how long I've been doing this, and I realize as that number gets bigger, it's hard to pretend I'm the newcomer to the industry anymore or anything like that. And so when you start saying how many years we've been doing it, well, that's not necessarily, not always a good thing when we start looking at it that way. But anyway, we have all of this experience, and we want to share that in talking about EA and the EA credential. And so I'll just go ahead and start by giving a foundation of what EA is and what it is, what it means. And as we say here, this slide is off the IRS website. EA, the enrolled agent status, is the highest credential that the IRS rewards. And the IRS being the Internal Revenue Service, the tax body, the tax organization in the United States. And this is the best you can do with them. This is the highest level, the highest credential that they provide. And what being an enrolled agent means is that you are able to represent somebody before the IRS. And so you fill out somebody's taxes, you're working with them, and there's a question, there's a problem, there's an audit, whatever the case may be. As a taxpayer, if I have an enrolled agent working with me, that enrolled agent is able to stand in my place, really, and to represent me in front of the IRS. And this is something that it's not easy to achieve. There's 3 exams. We'll talk about that here in just a minute, but this is a detailed tax exam. And so if you're looking for somebody to represent you, an EA is the person you want to have representing you, because what they've learned to become an EA is more than anybody else has learned for any other tax related credential, certification, whatever the case may be. And so that's what we're talking about today. And really, why is it that EA is a benefit to somebody? How it is that it's going to build a career, help a career, create a career opportunity for somebody. And so with that as the foundation, I will just go ahead and talk a little bit more about the structure of the exam process. And then we'll get into, Christy, things that you can talk about in terms of what the credential means. But the enrolled agent exams, there are 3 exams. Each of them is 3.5 hours long, and each of them is 100 multiple choice questions. So there's no essays, there's no fill out the 1040 or anything like that. And from one standpoint, you can look at a multiple choice question and say that the answers are all there. It's just a matter of recognizing which of those 4 choices is the correct answer. But there isn't a writing element to it. There isn't a long calculation that somebody's going to have to do. It's not fill out a 1040 and let's hope for the best. And the testing cycle is a little bit unique in how the EA exams are given compared to all of the other exams in the accounting, finance, and tax field. There's a testing cycle, and the one that we're in now started May 1st of this year, and it's going to continue until February of 2025. And then in March and April of 2025 and every successive year, the exam is not available. That is when the exam is being updated for the new tax law. And so there's a time where I know Christy is incredibly focused on updating the materials and getting all of those materials ready as soon as possible. And maybe she'll share some stories about this, but I know sometimes the United States government is not as helpful as they could be in updating the tax law, and they don't provide a tax update. They don't provide the final version as early as we would like. And so I know every year that's just a huge challenge. You have to first of all figure out what the updates are. It's not just to redo it, but
it's a challenge.
And I know too that some years the changes are more significant than other years. But anytime there's a change in the presidential office, there tends to be more significant changes to the tax code from one year to the next. And the 3 exams are broken down, I think, very neatly in that part 1 deals with individuals. Part 2 deals with businesses and organizations, and part 3 deals with the representation element, kind of the administrative side of being a tax professional, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, advertising, representing your client, and documentation, and are you allowed to receive the refund that your client is getting from the government, and things like that. And so it's something that if you are new to this completely and you are wondering how long it will take you to pass the 3 exams, it is very reasonable and realistic that you could finish before the end of February 2025.
Yeah,
okay? You could do it much earlier than that. It all comes down to a question of how much time do you commit to it. This is something that obviously if you have a lot of tax exposure and you come to the exams having 15 years of working in taxes and filling out 1040s, obviously part 1 is going to be much easier for you to prepare for and much quicker. But if you're starting now, doing it in this exam cycle is absolutely a realistic plan to have those 3 exams done during this exam cycle, and not having to worry about the tax update and have to worry about what changes between your studies in February and taking the exam in May. But I know that Christy did a great job getting everything done and as quickly as humanly possible, really. And so I don't think any of our candidates this year really had any issues in terms of having to go from February to May and being able to stay productive in their study time during that. And so that's kind of the foundation of the exams and the administrative side of the exams. We'll talk a little bit later about eligibility and how that fits into kind of what this is for an individual. And so what I'll do next is kind of turn this over to Christy with the question of how is it that the EA credential is beneficial, what it provides to a person in their career, and also the next slide, jumping ahead, is can it help me get a job, and what type of job might I be able to look for? And so, Christy, I'll turn that over to you. And if this becomes a little bit about your story and how you did it, that's absolutely fine, because that's the story that others are looking to achieve.
Okay, so I do I do get asked this question a lot, especially from maybe newer preparers or candidates who are kind of considering becoming an enrolled agent, and they're kind of on the fence, right? They don't know exactly what they want. When I started out in this business, I was just like an hourly bookkeeper, right? And for me, that was even like a second career. Like I didn't originally plan to go into tax and accounting. That wasn't what I was planning to do for the rest of my life. And I got a job as like an hourly bookkeeper. You know, sometimes you like fall into things. And I was telling Brian this before we started, and Jim, but I was making almost no money. This was in California 20 years ago. And I was doing payroll back when they still did payroll by hand. And I had some tax clients, and maybe some of you that are listening don't know this, but California specifically, this was when I was living in California. California specifically has a California registered tax preparer. So they have a state level licensing. Enrolled agents, CPAs, and attorneys are exempt. They don't have to do it. But if you don't have any other kind of licensing, you have to become a California registered tax preparer. You have to, take little CE every year. And I did that, right? And during that time, like I said, I was just making little hourly money. I mean, $10 an hour or something like that. The minimum wage was a lot less back then. And I heard about the enrolled agent license, and I don't even remember how I heard about it. Somebody told me you could become an EA. And I thought, well, I don't know if this is what I want to do, but it seemed like a natural progression since I was doing the bookkeeping and doing tax, and I liked it. But I thought, I'm not making very much money doing this. But I sat for the EA exam, and for those of you who think, want to know how long it takes, I had about 4 or 5 years of bookkeeping experience, just individual experience, no business experience whatsoever. And it took me about 12 months to pass all 3 parts. That's about average. So, you're going to hear stories from other people that say, oh, I passed all 3 exams in a month. And those things happen, but it's realistically, I think 9 to 12 months to pass all 3 parts is a realistic goal. And yeah, but if you start now, there's a very good chance that you could be an enrolled agent by next filing season. Absolutely. Depending on how much you study. But for me, it took a year. And I had a young son. I did it with a kid. And as my first child was born by then. And I'm not saying that it was easy, but it was absolutely manageable with a job and with a child. I made time to study. And within a year of having the EA license, it was even less than that. I did a couple of temp jobs for, let me see if I remember the name of the company. It was Agilon Finance. I don't know if they're still around, but they're like kind of like Robert Half. They're like a temp agency for people that do accounting and tax. And the demand was incredible. They wanted me to work all the time. I was declining jobs because, like I said, I had my kid. But once I became the EA, once I had an EA license, I didn't even really have that much experience, but they wanted me. And these were for like little temp jobs. And then I got a job with the state working as an accountant, making more money than I'd ever made in my life, right? Within a year. And then I left the state to make more money working for a CPA firm. And every year I just made more and more and more. So once I had the license, it was like it opened 1,000 doors for me. And this is coming from someone who I mean, I know that this is not the case for all of you, but it's like I made almost no money before this. My family was really like lower middle class, if not lower class. And, you know, the EA license changed my life. Absolutely. Absolutely changed my life. And even now as an enrolled agent, you know, they get my, I try to hide my email because I don't want to get solicitations. I'm fine doing the amount of work that I'm doing already. But they find my email somehow, and I get emails from like headhunters constantly. I mean, it's like H&R Block, Jackson Hewitt, this CPA firm, that CPA firm. They will contact you constantly for work. The demand is incredible. It never stops. So once you become an enrolled agent, you could work for a rep firm, you could work for a CPA firm, you could work for a chain, you could work for a franchise, you could open your own franchise.
You can start your own business.
You could start your own,
Yeah.
you know, company.
Your
You
own
could
practice.
work for a company and have your little gig on the side, getting clients on Fiverr or Upwork, any way you want. It's very easy to do that now. When I started in this business, the online thing wasn't really a thing. I mean, how do I put this? The idea of having like a remote only practice was not really that didn't really exist when I started in this business, but now it's absolutely possible. You never have to meet with the client like in your office face to face. You could build a remote practice very easily. So the sky's the limit once you become an enrolled agent. There's so many opportunities out there.
So you've kind of talked about this, but is it safe to say that enrolled agents find jobs?
Yeah, they do. They find jobs. Well, actually, the jobs find you. Like,
well, that's even better.
Yeah, because the licensing is public. I mean, you can make it private, right? So it's on the IRS website. You can look up people who have EA licenses. And a lot of like the CPE providers and a lot of those franchises, like the big franchises like H&R Block, they do like Freedom of Information Act requests to the IRS in order to get that information because it is public. That licensing is public. And you could, in your PTIN account, just for for those of you who have a PTIN, you can choose to make that information private so that they don't solicit. But I have my information set to private and they still solicit me. So the jobs will find you once you become an EA and you get your license listed and it's public. You'll get inundated. Be like, oh, do you want to, we're looking for this and this and this and this. I mean, you don't even really have to try very hard. I'll be honest. You'll be solicited. They'll send you emails constantly. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I know when I started being involved with EA, I got the list and found out that the EA group in my state lives a couple miles from me because that information is public and you go in and you find the addresses of the people that are enrolled agents. And this is something too that I see that some of the questions that have been asked are already, CPA, EA, which is better. And I don't want to get into that question right now, but we know that, and we see in the news that there's a shortage of CPAs in the US.
Yeah.
And
big shortage.
One of the things that CPAs do are taxes. And so if we just kind of follow this through the logical progression, if there's a shortage of CPAs in the US, and one of the things they do is taxes, is there's a shortage of people to do tax work. And I know from talking to companies and working with companies in India, there's a large number of people studying and becoming enrolled agents in India, going to work for the offshore companies that are
outsourcing
getting this outsourced work. And so if you're in America and you go to your not even the big four, but you go to your local CPA and you ask for tax work, it's very possible that some of that basic tax work is not being done locally, but it's going to be outsourced. And one of the places that's being outsourced to is India because there's just not enough people qualified to do that work. And so whether you're in the US or you're in India or anywhere else, if you go into a market where there's a shortage of people and you enter that market qualified with EA, able to demonstrate that you have the skills that are necessary, of course the jobs are going to come looking for you, because those companies are looking for, I'm sure they're all turning down work because they don't have the capacity to do it. And so
They
if
don't
you're
have the
able to add
capacity.
another enrolled agent to your team, that person's you're able to do more work. And so I think the answer is yes. Will it help me get a job? Yes, absolutely. I don't think there's really any doubt to that. And that's whether you're here in the United States, where I am, Christy's overseas, the rest, wherever you are, there's a place that you're going to get that employment from. So let's kind of go to the next thing. And we've talked about how it benefits you and it will help you get a job. So the next question is, how do you do it? How do you become an enrolled agent if the desire is there? So the next is, what are the requirements to become an enrolled agent? And this is one that I'll start with, and Christy, you can fill in the details that as necessary. But in essence, the requirements to become an enrolled agent or to be eligible to take the exams are minimal. You need to have a personal tax identification number, which you have to file with the IRS to get that. And one of the fields to fill that out is a Social Security number, a U.S. Social Security number. But if you don't have a Social Security number, there is a form you fill out in absence of having a Social Security number. And so if you're in the U.S. and you don't have a Social Security number, or you're outside the U.S. and you don't have a Social Security number, that doesn't matter. There is another form that you can fill out in place of having a Social Security number. And I think it's $29.95 to get in, $30 to get your PTIN. And you can't be a felon. If you're a felon, then you're not eligible to become an enrolled agent. But I don't think we're excluding too many people that are here today.
Exactly.
From that, I'm not sure this is a career opportunity, but that's kind of the requirement. And so what that means is there is no educational requirement. You don't have to have a bachelor's degree in accounting. You don't have to have a master's degree. You don't have to have a bachelor's degree. You don't have to have a degree. And there's no 2 years of work experience or 5 years of work experience. And so this is something that is open to somebody who's willing to work to pass the exams. So Christy, once somebody takes the exams and becomes an EA, what are the requirements to maintain that going forward?
Okay. Once they have the EA license, once you actually receive your license, it has to be renewed every 3 years. So it's a 3-year renewal. The initial enrollment cycle, the first time you become an EA, sometimes you will have to renew quicker than that, just because you're in the middle of an enrollment cycle, right? And then after that, after your first initial renewal, then it's every 3 years from going forward. Okay, so every 3 years, and you have to take 2 hours of ethics. You have to take a 2-hour ethics course specifically for enrolled agents. There's ethics courses that lawyers and CPAs also take. They have their own ethics requirements. So you have to make sure it's Circular 230 ethics. So it has to be specifically tax ethics. And you have to take a 2-hour ethics course every single year, and a minimum of 16 hours of federal tax CE every year. And you have to do 72 hours total every 3 years. So I feel like that's very easy to meet. 16 hours is not very much. And there's a lot of CE providers out there. Even the IRS offers CE for free. You can just listen into the IRS webinars if you want. And there's a lot of, networking events that you can go to. There's the IRS tax forums, NATP has events, and you could get all of your CE in a weekend, really, if you go to like one of those forums. So you do have to take CE every year, but other than that, and then you have to pay a fee to renew your license.
Not only is 16 hours not a lot, but also if you think about it, you want your tax professional to learn every year.
Yeah, keep up to date.
I joke about this. I passed the CPA exam almost 30 years ago. And so if somebody asks me for tax advice and I say, well, when I passed the CPA exam 30 years ago, the tax law was,
Yeah,
that's not going to work. And so the 16 hours that you need, you're going to kind of have to do yourself just to be able to answer the questions of your client from one year to the next.
exactly.
Because, and I'm sure Christy will agree with this, you end up with a lot of clients like me who know enough, but not all of it. And so the client comes in thinking they know what the law is, or they know what the law was 2 years ago. And so you have to maintain that current, being current with the tax code yourself, just as part of doing your job and providing that service to your clients. And so so all of this to say, the requirements to be eligible to take the exams and become an enrolled agent are, I'm not sure I want to say minimal, but they're not strict. You need to get your PTIN and fill out the forms and pay your money to take the exams. And then after you take your exams, it's not a terrible burden to maintain that
Exactly.
status going forward, because you should be taking continuing education.
Yeah.
The tax code changes every year, which is why the exam changes every year. And you need to do something just to stay current with what the requirements of the tax code are. And so this is something that, from both the standpoint of initial eligibility and also maintaining your status after you've passed the exams, not difficult, not expensive, and more of an administrative task really than a burdensome process to maintain all of that. So, go ahead, Christy.
Oh, the other big benefit that I was going to mention is that the EA license, the enrolled agent certification is, or credential rather, the enrolled agent credential is federal. It's a federal license. It's not a state license. So you're not tied to any one state. Like attorneys and certified public accountants, CPAs, are licensed by the state, by their state boards of accountancy, for example. But enrolled agents are licensed by the U.S. Treasury Department. So if you live in Texas and you want to move to Florida or Wyoming or whatever, or even overseas, you can maintain your license, and it's a federal license, and you don't have to worry about like transferring your license from one state to another. Your rights to eligibility do not change, and your ability to represent taxpayers before the Internal Revenue Service also does not change, regardless of where you reside. So it's a lot more flexible than those other two licenses, and there's a lot of those other two licensing, and there's a lot of enrolled agents where they maintain their license and then they work remotely from wherever they want. Like you could get in an RV, and as long as you have internet connection, you can work from wherever you are.
Yeah. Well, and also your clients can be from wherever.
Exactly. That too.
Whatever state you're in, your clients can be from any
other
state,
state.
anybody who's paying taxes to the U.S. government. Your clients may not be in the United States. And so it's nice in that you're not only are you not limited where you can be geographically, but your clients aren't limited to having to be within the same state or area that you are. And so you mentioned earlier having a remote practice. Absolutely. This is something that you're able to find clients. I mean, with advertising like it is now online, you're able to find clients anywhere and service those clients anywhere. And as you said, it's a federal, so nobody asks what state are you in or from, because it doesn't matter. Whereas for lawyers and CPAs, you are limited as to what states it is that your license is valid for. So this is something that we've determined so far that it's a tremendous benefit to a career, whether it's a first career, second career. If you're looking to, I was just talking to somebody recently who's wanting to do EA as they end their finance career and have this be something that they kind of transition to as a part-time process, as they, they don't want to work full-time, but they're looking, and this is something that absolutely busy season, tax season, there's a lot of demand for that. And it's not, the eligibility requirements are not such that you may not be eligible. So let's turn briefly then to the next question in terms of how is it that you study for that? What are the ways that we have that? And HOCK with Christy and passkey. We have a wonderful system that, and I see somebody asked a question as to whether or not our materials were sufficient for the exam and whether you needed other materials. You don't. Everything that you could possibly need is available and is part of what we have. And so we have an online textbook, and there's also hard copies available through Amazon. We have a test bank that has more than enough questions to practice and to go through all of this. We have videos with Christy, and I will say that it's a pleasure for me to work with Christy like this and to have a webinar with Christy like this, because the feedback we get, and for people who know me, the feedback we get about Christy is better than the feedback we get about me. And I'll say that doesn't happen too often, but I know it happens. And so, and I've listened. I haven't.
He's lying, everybody.
No,
He's
no.
lying.
What I've done. Christy's classes are dynamic and engaging, and what Christy does is she brings all of those years of experience, and stories isn't the right word because they happened.
I mean,
you know?
yeah, like tax law
so
doesn't have to be
case studies, all of those small case studies, or larger case studies.
It doesn't have to be boring. There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot that happens in tax that's fun. I mean, some of the client stories, of course, they're sad. Sometimes you're helping people and they've had like problems with the IRS, but some of the stories are funny, and when you get to help someone solve an IRS problem, that's really rewarding. Like, it feels really good to be able to help people. And many times you can't do that if you don't have the proper licensing, because the people are already in collections, or they're already being like garnished. And if you don't have a license to represent them, then you can't help them. Once you become an enrolled agent, you can. So, I do try to talk a lot about the stories in my videos, because I want you to have a realistic understanding of what it's like when you actually get into this business.
And that's how you remember, that detail, that element. You remember the story, and that story helps you then know what it is that needs to be done. And so, Christy's videos are complete. They go from, I don't know, A to Z, whatever the, from the 1040 to the circular 230, however.
Yeah, from the 1040 to the circular 230.
Yeah, there we go.
They say like, it's soup to nuts. It's the soup to nuts from one to the other. Yeah, we do try to cover everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, not only are the textbook and the videos and the questions, if you have a question, you ask. And Christy doesn't answer all of the questions, but she does answer a lot of the questions. We have some other people who help with that as well. But the opportunity to ask questions, and we get them every day, a handful of questions every day. There's a point that somebody doesn't quite get, or they've confused something or whatever, and we get those questions answered. And we also have live MCQ sessions where we go through, it's not led by Christy anymore, but where we have that opportunity to talk about something, to see how questions are being performed. And so really what we have is all of the content, all of the knowledge that you would possibly need. There's no need to refer to other materials or other practice questions. And we have the results and the feedback to show that, and we'll share a little bit of the feedback here coming up. But this is just something that it's a all-in-one package, and we have a wonderful pass map system that takes you through the textbook and the videos and the questions for each study unit. And so it just kind of, we call it pass map because it's a map to your passing the exam. It takes you step by step through that. We have mock exams for you to see how you're doing. I know that you'll do the practice questions more than once, and so you kind of begin to recognize that, oh, the question about Christy and Brian, the answer is C, and you know that. But the mock exams are new questions, and they are updated every year. I was working with Christy on those updates this year, and so I know that they're updated and they're specific, and it's not something that we just casually roll them forward and change the years from one year to the next. The whole test bank is updated. And I know that there's lazy ways to update a test bank, and one of them is you just search and replace 2022 with 2023. But for tax, that doesn't work. And so Christy has gone through every single question to make certain that the floor, the deduction, the limit, whatever the case may be, is accurate for, and this is something that's as simple as when they change the deductibility of meals for business
Yeah.
purposes, and they change
I was so
our
sad about that
mileage rate,
change.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so something like that requires every question to be updated.
Yeah.
And that's what Christy has done. And so I know that that content is all there, and we put it all together in a bundle for you to easily go through it. Because I know when you sit down and there's a 300-page book, it's intimidating. But
Right.
when you break it down and you do it study unit by study unit, chapter by chapter, and you kind of build up on that, it becomes a very simple thing to do. And so all of these materials, how many hours, Christy, do you want to answer how many hours somebody needs to be looking to study? And this is something that it's different for everybody.
It's
And
different for
so
everybody.
if you
Yeah,
have
it's different for everybody.
past experience with 1040s, part one's going to be less for you than it is
Yeah.
for somebody who doesn't have experience. If
Yeah.
you've been involved with Circular 230 in some way, part three is going to be a little bit easier for you. So but what's a good starting point for how long somebody should be planning to study?
I would say like on average, and like Brian said, it's going to be different for everybody. You know, if you have an accounting degree, part two is going to be easier for you. If you've been working in tax for a few years, preparing individual tax returns, part one is going to be easier for you. So usually I say, 40 hours for each part and maybe 60 for part two, but that all depends on the person. And if you're talking about time, 2 to 3 months for each part, that's like a good average to shoot for.
Right.
I'm going to study 2 to 3 months for each part, maybe a little bit more for part two, if you don't have any business tax experience, but right around there. I mean, very easily you could do it in a year.
And also the question about how long it's going to take. Are you married? Do you have kids? Are you working? And so part of it is real life gets in the way.
Exactly.
And I mean, it doesn't get in the way, but that's part of it. And so if you just finished school and you have an accounting degree and you're not working right now, well, you might be done in 6 weeks.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you're going to get married in the next 2 months and you're working a full-time job, and then it's going to take a little bit longer. And that's just the reality of the process we go through. But it's good to have a starting point. And one of the things in PassMap is we've given estimates for how long it should take. And that's actually based on how long the videos are, how many pages in the textbook, and how many questions there are. We don't just think, oh, well, let's pretend it takes 60 hours because that's a better number. No, we want this to be realistic. And so you put in the date that you plan to take the exam, and the system calculates how many hours a week you need to study. And so if you're going through this and you see that suddenly you need to be studying 58 hours a week to make your exam date, you probably need to change your exam date, because studying 58 hours a week isn't going to happen. But it's just a way to help you stay on track and recognize whether or not what you're planning to do is realistic or not, because it's not something you want to fail unnecessarily, and just because you took it before you were ready or something like that.
I've had so much positive feedback regarding the PassMap, and that's not like hyperbole or an exaggeration or anything like that, because in the last LMS, or learning management system that Passkey had, we had the videos just in one long chunk. So like a chapter would be, a 2-hour video, and then it wouldn't actually be tied to the textbook. Like the textbook was available, but not like this, where it's completely integrated and you could study, like a little bit and every single day. Like, okay, I'm going to study 2 videos today and I'm going to read, a couple of pages in the textbook. You could really tailor your study time based on how much study time you actually have. So this format, I think, is a lot better, especially if you're a working professional, or if you're working or you have a busy life. You can really track how much time you need. And you can also, if you have 15 minutes or 20 minutes,
Yeah.
you could go in and study one video and take a couple of practice questions. So it's really designed for busy people. And the feedback that I've received on the pass map has been 100% positive. There's nobody that preferred the older system. Let's just put it that way.
Well, and it's just a matter of being able to use the time you have. And if you
Yeah,
have 15
exactly.
minutes, you can go in and do 10 MCQs and review something. And so a wonderful tool, and all that. We have a lot of questions that have been asked that we haven't answered yet. And so I'm going to, the cost, obviously this is part of it. There are two subscription models available, one that includes the online textbook, videos, and test bank and mock exams, and the other that is the textbook, the online textbook, or no, I'm sorry, the videos and the test bank, if you have the textbook already. And as we said, if you're in the US, the textbook is available on Amazon. You can get it through Amazon. You can get it through our premium subscription. The premium subscription is $45 a month, and the standard subscription is $30 a month. And so when you start saying, I might study for 10 months. Well, if you study for 10 months with the premium subscription, it's $450. If you're with the standard subscription, it's $300. And so that's kind of the number you have in mind as you're doing a budget or planning what the total cost is going to be for your studying. The cost of the exam registration, it's $19.75 to get the PTIN. I was wrong about that earlier when I said it was $30. It's only $20. And the exam fee is $259. So you're hopefully only going to take the exam 3 times. And so that's another $780 in exam fees to take those 3 exams. But if you fail, every time you retake the exam, it's another $259. And then after you pass the exam, it's $140 to enroll as, well, that's probably the wrong word, the enrollment fee to become an enrolled agent. But
yeah.
but and so this is something that, $1,300, $1,500 all out is a realistic possible budget for going from zero, from nothing done in the process to being an enrolled agent.
And I tell candidates, the level of investment comparatively to something like the CPA license, which you have to have a 4-year degree, which costs like a minimum
5-year
of
degree.
$1,000, right?
Yeah.
The amount of investment that you could potentially make to become an enrolled agent, you'll make that back on your first business return. Like average partnership tax return or S corp return, that's like $2,500. Even TurboTax charges $1,400 now for like assisted S corp filings. So I mean, you will make that back on your first rep case. So I feel like the barrier to entry is really low comparatively with other licensing.
Yeah.
And it really, like I said before, it opens a ton of doors. And with HOCK, at least with the subscription model, I know that there's other study providers out there. I'm not going to say anything bad about any other study provider. There's a lot of good other study providers. The thing is that many of those other study providers, they want to charge you like a really large lump sum upfront. Okay. And HOCK is not like that. They're like a fully monthly subscription model now. And you could try it. And if you don't like it, then you just pay for 1 month and that's it. So it's a really low commitment. You don't have to basically sign your life away. And if you do like it, you use it only for as long as you need it. Yeah.
Well, and actually when you subscribe, there's a 7-day free trial.
There's a 7-day free trial. I forgot about that.
If you go right now and sign up, you'll enter your credit card information, but it won't be charged now. So 7 days from today, it'll be charged. If you cancel any time between now and then, you won't be charged. So you have 7 days to
try
see
it out.
that I'm correct about Christy's videos and that they are the best videos you've ever seen. And also this is something about us. Canceling is easy. You can cancel yourself. You don't have to call us. We're not going to try to convince you. We're not going to, just if it's not for you, you cancel and maybe you're not ready to study right now. You want to wait and you're going to come back in 6 months. That's fine. And so it's a very simple process, and there's the free trial. Then you pay month by month. And if you are going to be gone you're getting married and you're going to be gone for a month, well, don't pay that month, and so it works out very well.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I feel like,
I mean,
no contracts was always really attractive to me. No contracts. So there's no commitment. If something happens, I know that life gets in the way. You cancel, you just press a button. You don't have to call, and nobody's going to try to convince you to stay. And, it's not Comcast, everybody. You don't have to worry.
I was just thinking, I remember one time I tried to cancel a TV subscription, and that took far too much time and energy. But so
they're going to transfer you.
What I want to do before we get to questions, we've got a lot of questions that hopefully Jim is sorting out and trying to combine for us to answer as many as we can. We have a very a short video, a few minutes of some people that have studied with us and their experience. And so I'm going to play this video, and then after this, we'll get into answering the questions that you have. So let me go ahead and...
Hello, my name is Jose Luis. Let me tell you something about HOCK International. Before I started studying through those material, I went to a couple of competitors, and then I totally, to be honest, I waste my money because they were like, when I compare both systems, they speak to you is very like they're reading like a newspaper, and you get lost easily. So compare versus Christina or HOCK International it's like a baby step learning. That's my personal feeling. The material is well organized. It's by section, by charter.
So my experience with HOCK International, their study materials for enrolled agent, is I keep kicking myself that I didn't do it before. It's easy to use. It's wherever you have a connection to the internet, via your phone, via a laptop, you can study. We're camping this weekend, so it's raining right now, so I'm in the camper getting some study time in. It's just that easy. You can take it anywhere and do it anytime you need to do it. You can listen to the lectures in the car. I listen to it usually when I clean my house and do dishes. And so it's just very user-friendly. It's easy to fit in. The material is great. The reading material is very practical, and that's followed by questions, then it's followed by the answers and an explanation. So if you got it wrong, you can read why you got it wrong and why the right answer is right. So it's just so hands-on. Just like I said, I'm just kicking myself that I didn't do this before now.
Hi everyone, Deanna from Florida. I studied for my EA exam, the first one, and I used only the HOCK International study path. And it was very methodical in the way that it takes you through everything. And it has, you read the literature that they have, you do some sample test questions, you watch the videos. They have forums. I'm not going to tell you everything about it because I'm sure this is going to be covered in the webinar, exactly what it does and how it works. But I will tell you that it does work. I passed my first exam. I'm halfway through the material for my second exam. I'm actually going to be moving up the date of my exam because I'm that confident. I know the material and it holds me accountable. It says if you're going to take the exam on this date, then you need to have this material understood, comprehended, and just need to know this material by this date. And it's right, they keep you right on path and keep you going, and it's individualized. So if you find that you need to put more study hours in, push out your exam date. If you're going through it much faster, then you can move up your exam date. I have been exposed to many of the other study software systems that are out there. And I can tell you by far, this is the only one that has stuck with me. This is the only one that has worked. And it is the one that helped me pass the exam. And I'm going to be coming back here again to tell you when I pass the second exam. So good luck, you can do this. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jose Luis.
So a few students that are happy, Christy, those are your success stories, and it's good moving up an exam, feeling comfortable and confident. And so we're at the point now where we can answer questions. I know we've given a lot of information. Hopefully we've answered a lot of the questions that you came in with, but I know that we haven't answered all of them. And I see we have almost 40 questions that are still open that people have asked while we've been talking, Christy. And so, Jim, are you able to come back and start leading us through some of these questions in a more structured manner?
Sure, I will do my best. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. You can keep typing them into the Q&A section, and we can answer some of them here live, and others we can type the answer to you and send that. So, Christy, I think just to start, can you go through the registration process again? How do people actually register for these exams? Where do they go, and how do they sign up? And then along with that, are there tips that you have on should they take them in order 1, 2, and 3, or is there a better exam to take first if you have specific experience? What is your best advice on actually registering and getting through the 3 exams?
Okay, so registering for the exam.
I'll jump in and do the
go ahead.
registering really quickly, and you can do the order of the exams. Okay. The registration process is actually very straightforward and simple, and we have guidance for this on our site. But you're essentially registering with the IRS to get your PTIN, and then you're registering with Prometric to take your exams, and then you're registering with the exam center, wherever it is you're going to take your exam, to schedule the time to take the exam. It's all online. It's all, I won't say easy or simple, but it's a fairly straightforward process, and we have the guidance about that. So there's no education that needs to be proved, no experience that needs to be proven. So it's a fairly straightforward registration process. So which part should they do, and what order should they take them in, Christy?
I get asked this question a lot, and I usually just recommend that you take the exam in order, but you don't have to. I took the exam in order, part 1, part 2, part 3, and that's how most people sign up for it. But sometimes people will take part 1 and part 3 because those tend to be easier if you have individual tax experience. And then they'll save part 2 for last, because part 2, the scope for part 2 is a little more intense for most people. It's just the amount of information that you have to study for part 2 tends to be more difficult, especially for beginning preparers. But there are some people where part 2 is easier for them. For example, if you have someone who has an accounting degree, then part 2 is going to be easier for them because they probably took classes on corporate tax and partnership tax. And I took accounting classes too in college, and I had to take courses on corporations, partnerships, that sort of thing. Accounting 1A, 1B. So it just depends, but usually I recommend that you take it in order. But for people who have accounting degrees, or maybe they have another license, like maybe they're a CMA already or a CIA already, certified internal auditor or whatever, they might find that taking part 2 is easier for them first. But generally, you don't have to take them in order though. You can take them in any order that you want.
Okay, great. There's a lot of questions around the rolling time frame and when people have to pass. Is there a time limit from when you start to when you finish taking exams?
Yeah, as I'm speaking, okay, as I'm speaking right now, there's a 3-year window where if you pass part 1, you have 3 years to pass the other 2 parts. Usually it's 2 years. The government changed it to 3 years because of the COVID pandemic and everything that was going on with that. So there are people who've taken parts in the past where they're still within that 3-year period, and if they get a move on, then they can pass the other 2 parts within that 3-year window and get their EA license. But as of right now, it's a 3-year window. Once you pass 1 part, you have 3 years to pass the other 2 parts.
And for the vast majority of candidates, that's more than enough time.
Yeah,
Because we're talking about, you could pass them all in 9 months or 12 months, and the 3
Yeah.
years or 2 years starts after you pass your first exam.
exactly.
So you really have 3 years or 2 years to pass 2 exams, and that's enough for the vast majority of candidates.
99%
Yeah.
of the candidates.
Yeah.
I mean, most people do not take 3 years or even 2 years to pass
Yeah.
all 3 parts.
Yeah.
Usually they do it within 9 months to a year. That's the average. But if you need more time, for example, if you have to take another part over, which is not unusual, you know, sometimes people will take part 2 again or part 1 again. And many times they'll pass the second time around, you know, they'll get close. You absolutely can do that. There's no detriment if you fail it the first time or whatever, other than the fact that you have to pay for the exam fee again. But you have 3 years to pass all 3 parts.
If you fail, it's not part of your public record.
Exactly.
You're still an EA. It doesn't say Brian finally, after 7 years of trying, became.
Yeah, nobody's gonna know.
You're either an
Nobody's gonna
EA
know.
or you're not an EA. There's no.
And the funny thing is I actually saw this was last year. I actually saw a post from a candidate who took each part, like he took each part multiple times and he just never gave up. And there's a lot of candidates out there that where maybe they fail part 1 and then they think, oh, I'm never going to be able to make it. But the whole idea is that if you stick with it, you're going to pass. I mean, I've seen people with zero tax experience, zero accounting background, pass the EA exam in 9 months, 6 months, just because they stuck with it. So yeah, absolutely, it's doable.
Great, thank you. I think there's some confusion because of the way tax years are filed. Like we file our 2023 taxes the year after, right? So when that happens, are people still, if I pass the exam right now, am I eligible to do taxes from multiple years, or am I stuck with just the current knowledge? And how do I get information on all the tax changes that happen for next year? Am I still valid?
Okay, yeah, that's a confusing aspect of the exam. I'll admit that. The exam does not follow, does not exactly follow the tax year, the accounting cycle for individuals. What happens is the calendar year that we're in right now is 2024. I'm talking in 2024, but the tax returns that we're filing are 2023. So tax return filings are always historical. You're reporting the income that you made last year, right? That's what we're doing. So the EA exam is also based on 2023, not 2024. 2024 isn't even over yet. Congress hasn't even decided what tax law is going to be for 2024. So if you take the EA exam now, you're going to be tested on 2023 tax law. And you will continue to be tested on 2023 tax law up until the last day of February 2024. That's when the current exam cycle ends. And on the HOCK website, that's the information that is going to be on the HOCK website until the current exam cycle ends. The current exam cycle ends on the last day of February 2024. And you will be tested on 2023 tax law. And then what ends up happening is when you get to March 1st, the current exam basically gets shut off. Prometric doesn't offer the exam in March and April, and then it turns over to the next tax year. So in 2025, March 1st, 2025, then that's when you're going to have to start learning about a new tax year. So yeah, that's a drawback to stretching out your study time for multiple years, is that, yeah, you're going to have to learn the tax law for the next tax year. If you wait more than a year to try to pass all 3 parts. It's doable. I know people who have done it, but it definitely makes it a little bit harder.
And Christy, along with that, people understand that this is a federal system. So you learn about federal tax. If you also do state taxes, where do you learn that information?
the EA exam does not ask about state tax issues because every state has different laws. So there's 50 US states, plus there's US territories that have, like Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands have a completely different tax code as well. So the EA exam doesn't ask about the laws for any particular state. And usually my recommendation is once you actually become an EA and you want to learn state tax law, is that you get involved with the enrolled agent state, what is it? The NAEA, the National Association of Enrolled Agents. They have a state chapter in every state, and they will offer state-specific CPE for your state once you actually become an EA. But they're not going to ask you about state law on the exam.
Okay, great. Christy, I'll give you a break for a second and ask a question to Brian here. Brian, we have quite a few international attendees on, and people are wondering, why should somebody get the EA outside of the United States? Are there jobs available? Is it a valid credential that they should pursue?
Yes and yes. Now, that's a very short answer. A lot of it would also depend on where you are and what are the opportunities for getting that job. There's a lot of tax work that's being outsourced out of the US, and I know a lot of that is going to India, and we work with a lot of companies in India that have huge accounting and tax outsource businesses. So I know that if you're in India, yes, there are companies in India that are hiring large numbers, hundreds of EAs a year. In other countries, that those employment opportunities for EAs may be more limited to the worldwide accounting firms. They may be hiring EAs. Depending on where you are, I don't know what the outsource business opportunities are. But in India, yes, absolutely. There's a lot of opportunity for enrolled agents in India doing outsourced work. Other countries, it would depend on what outsourcing opportunities there are, what U.S. tax work the audit firms are doing.
Okay, great. Thanks. There's a lot of questions about salary and standard pay for EA, and I know there's a lot of variation in the world. But Christy, do you know if there is a standard pay? Are they generally paid hourly or by the return? Can you do this independently, or are you hired through an agency? How does all of that work?
Yeah, okay. So I can give you some averages, but there's a huge difference between enrolled agents that are working for a firm. So if you're an employee working for someone else, obviously the amount is going to be different that you can earn versus you having your own client base, right? So there's a big difference there. But for example, once you become an enrolled agent, if you want to just work remotely for like Intuit, for example, they're paying $29 an hour to do like TurboTax Advisor. Tax Act Professional has an advisory program like that. QuickBooks has an advisory program like that, where if you want to just work online as many hours or as few hours as you want, really flexible, then you could do that. You could work for a large corporation like that. You can also work for, like Brian said, for a CPA firm. Many of them do outsource. I know for a fact that Ernst & Young and even big, huge firms like Deloitte, they're hiring not just in the United States, but also overseas enrolled agents. Like I said, there's a CPA shortage, and they need people who are licensed and for their tax departments. Absolutely. So I know that the demand is there, and you could work for one of those firms, and you also can, have your own tax practice on the side. And as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, it's not like it was 20 years ago. It's relatively easy to build a tax practice completely remotely. And for those of you who have like Upwork accounts or Fiverr accounts or any of those freelance sites, I encourage you to log on and just look for tax preparation on those sites. And you'll see that there are tons of foreign preparers and domestic preparers, people in the United States who are offering their tax services there. And many of them are offering their tax services for hundreds of dollars an hour. So, I mean, there's always going to be people who are offering lower cost tax preparation, but definitely you can make more money either hourly or whether you have your own practice as an enrolled agent. So there's no way that the license wouldn't help you make more. You know, you can do more. When you don't have a license, you can't help people with collections issues, or if they have a problem, or if they are delinquent. And delinquent filers are so easy. But it's very difficult to obtain the information from the IRS if you're not an enrolled agent, because you can't represent them. But once you become an enrolled agent, you can call up the IRS and say, how many years is this person delinquent? Can I get wage and income transcripts for this person? And you don't even have to have a lot of experience to do that. And that's like multi-thousand-dollar engagement if you have somebody who comes in and hasn't filed in 5 years. And many times those tax clients are very easy. And that's something that you could do as an EA that's not hard at all.
Great, thank you.
Taxpayers really, they don't know where to start if they are delinquent. They don't know, especially if they're missing W-2s or whatever. And that's something that you can do very easily. As an EA, you can obtain their transcripts in 48 hours. It's very easy.
And I think a lot of people would prefer to work with a person.
Exactly.
And not a chat bot or an email address you send stuff up
Yeah.
to. So this is something that, and there's questions about how do you start your practice and how do you find clients and things like that. And I think part of any business being started is you first have to find your first client, and that may be a neighbor, somebody you know, somebody who you're able to, and then that person tells somebody who tells somebody. And so you build your business really, and I know this sounds kind of like a cliche or something, but it's one client at a time and providing excellent service for that one client. And people talk, and taxes are an issue of concern for a lot of people. And so if you're looking to start your own practice here in the US, you're not trying to find 1,000 clients your first year.
Yeah.
You know, you'll build to that, but it's a matter of, and it may be something where when you start, you do work for an H&R Block or a Jackson Hewitt or somebody. And then, you know, you're slowly over time, your individual clients increase and you're able to do less and less work for another company. But it's
most preparers do start out like working for a firm, at least part-time.
Yeah.
And they get the majority of their experience that way. And I did too. You know, I worked for more than one CPA firm at the beginning of my career, but you don't have to go that route. It's just that most people do go that route. And then many of them build their little practices on the side. You're getting your little private clients while you're working for the firm and learning how to prepare tax returns. And within a year or two, you'll have the experience that you need to strike out on your own if you want, or you can continue to work for firms. So you have more options that way.
If you go LinkedIn, Facebook, and look for how many EA groups there are.
Yeah.
And there are, and obviously some of them have larger practices than others, but this is clearly an opportunity for somebody who wants to, you know, you start with whatever company, but if your goal is to have your own practice and have a little more control over your time and your hours and who you work with, this is a very realistic way to build to that as your career.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Christy, we have Michael who's asked several questions at once, and I promised him we would do our best to answer those. They also answered some other people's questions, so I have 6 questions from Michael here for you.
Okay.
First is,
Give it my best shot.
Can you talk about the pros and cons of working for like an H&R Block or a TurboTax, those kinds of companies? What are the pros and cons of going to work for one of those as opposed to having your own practice, I guess?
The benefit for working for one of those larger firms is that those jobs are really easy to get. I mean, especially at the beginning of tax season, most of them are really trying to do mass hiring, and they hire people without licenses and without any experience to work in those franchises. And the drawback is that the pay usually isn't as good. Many times it's partially commission based. And but they're easy to get. So you don't have to worry about maybe the possibility that you won't be hired. You absolutely will be hired. They will absolutely take you if you have an enrolled agent license, because you're going to have more licensing and experience just by virtue of the fact that you studied for the EA exam than half of the people that they're hiring for just the tax season. But the drawback obviously is that you're working for a franchise and the pay is less. And you probably would learn more working for a firm, a CPA firm rather, or an enrolled agent firm where it's not a franchise, right? And then the other drawback to working for a franchise is many times that's just seasonal work, and they let go the majority of their workers right around April or May. So, they get that huge crunch between January and April, and then that's it. So usually I encourage people to work for like a CPA firm, because most of the time, or an enrolled agent firm that's established, because most of the time they will have year-round work, because individual taxes, the majority is filed between January and April, but S corps and C corps and nonprofits, exempt entities, they file all year round. A lot of those tax returns are fiscal year. So there, you have payroll, you have S corps are due in September, C corps are due all year round. So if you're working for a firm like that, you're going to be busy all year round. You're not just going to have like a 4-month crunch.
Okay, great. This one might be a little harder. He just wanted to know about an estimated starting salary for somebody that has limited or no tax experience once you earn your EA. In the US, I guess.
Yeah, if you work for a franchise, then like I said, maybe using Intuit as a model, or Tax Act Professional when they hire their enrolled agents. It's right now the going rate last time I checked was $29 an hour, something like that, $30 an hour for you to work remotely as an advisor, and that's with the EA license. But if you work for a firm, if you work for like a CPA firm, starting salary is going to be probably closer to between 50 and 70,000, I would say, as an employee.
Well, and a lot of that also depends on location.
Yeah, it depends on
Chicago is
location.
going to be more than Des Moines, and so
yeah. And then if you're striking out on your own practice, then that's going to vary a whole lot. But
it goes down
average,
to zero. You go down to zero and then build up from there.
Your own practice. But I mean, even when I just first started, I think my hourly rate in California, and this was a long time ago, I think my hourly rate in California when I first started as an EA after I had my license was $125 an hour, and that would be considered really low right now. Really low. So 15 years ago, when I was working for a CPA firm, they were charging out, their bookkeeping hourly rate was 70. An unlicensed preparer was 125. And I think if you had one of the CPAs or the managing partners, it was like 350 and up. So, I hope that answers the question, but you're obviously going to have a big difference between, if you're working for a franchise, working for a CPA firm, or actually charging your own hourly rate, but right around there. And there's no reason why you can't do both. You can work for a firm and build your own practice on the side. Most tax preparers do that. There's nothing preventing you from doing that. So yeah, right around there.
Just off of that quick, somebody else asked, is it okay to work for more than one tax firm in the same season?
Yeah. I mean, well, the tax firms don't like that.
Yeah, as per the contract. I mean, if
the tax firms don't like that. Some tax firms, some franchises, I'm not going to say tax firms, but some franchises have like non-competes. But I think I read that like the Federal Trade Commission has banned those. Like you can't put in a non-compete into your contracts anymore. I don't know. I've never worked for a firm that forced me to sign a contract, like non-compete. So, and actually, many years ago, I wrote a book about this, and I put it, it's for sale on Amazon. It's older now. I think I wrote it in 2011 or 2012. It's the EA practice building book, something like that. Sorry, I can't remember the exact title. It's been over a decade. But I interviewed a tax professional who is an EA. He started out as a QuickBooks Pro advisor. Many of you know what that is, right? QuickBooks Pro is Intuit. It's a bookkeeping pro advisor program where you become a bookkeeper through Intuit. He started out that way, and he became an enrolled agent. He worked for a firm that had like a non-compete like that, which is not uncommon 10 years ago, where they said, you can't steal our clients, you can't contact the clients, you can't do anything to contact them if you quit. Okay, which is fine. What he did is he worked for the franchise for the tax season, and while he was working for the franchise, he was studying for the EA license. I mean, many of the franchises will have like their own study materials because they want you to become an EA but continue to work for them, right? They want you to do that. But what he did is he worked for them for the tax season, and it was like a second career for him. He worked for them for the tax season, passed the EA exam, and quit like right in December because he's like, I'm going to have my own practice. For this tax season, I'm going to make my own money, because he knew based on what the franchise was charging the clients, you know, I'm making $15 or $20 an hour, but the franchise that I'm working for is charging $450 for a tax return. And I know I can do this. He just spent the whole tax season preparing tax returns for people, for the public. And what he did was he passed the E exam and then quit in December, and he didn't solicit the clients. What he got together with two other tax preparers who had also done the same thing. They all left this franchise at the same time, passed the E exam together. They decided to come together and share an office, right? They shared tax software as well. They bought tax software and they pooled their money. And what they did is they put their picture in the newspaper, big, huge picture of themselves, and said, hey, we're here now. Do you want tax services? So that's not solicitation. That's you put your picture in and then they contact you. And he said that the first year they were like inundated. So there's a million ways to get around that sort of thing legally. I feel like that's ethical, right? If you put your picture online on Facebook and you say, come to me, you're not soliciting anybody, they're soliciting you. So yeah, like you could easily work for a firm and do tax returns for a year, get some experience under your belt. And if they do have a non-compete and you don't like that, you can quit. I mean, there's slavery's illegal in the United States, so nobody can force you to work for them. You don't have to stay. And once you have the experience that you think, you know, will allow you to strike out on your own, you can absolutely do that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's always important, just check to make sure there's not a conflict of interest of who you're working with, but follow the rules of your contract. But
yeah, absolutely. I would never encourage you to do anything unethical, because then that kind of like leaves a bad you don't want to burn your bridges, basically. Yeah. Especially if you have a good working relationship with the boss that you do have, because if you continue to have a good working relationship with them, then many times you will get to a point where you'll be specializing. I'm kind of going further with this, but many times you will find that you will specialize. There'll be something that you like doing. Like maybe you want to specialize in partnerships, or maybe you want to specialize in real estate. There's a lot of enrolled agents that will specialize. And maybe there's something you get, something that you don't want to do, especially when it comes to rep work. And you'll like refer it back to your old employer. Like, hey, do you want to take this case? This person is not like in my wheelhouse. So you can have working relationships with your former employers. I have a very good working relationship with the former employers that I've had. So there's no reason why it has to be like acrimonious or bad. You could strike out on your own. And many times if you do work for a firm, they understand that that's going to happen once you have your own experience. You're going to want to do your own thing. Okay, great. Back to some of Michael's questions here. One that I know that you can answer right away is, will HOCK have passkey
CE credit, continuing education credit courses at
The
some
answer,
point?
right now, we don't. Maybe
Maybe
we
in the
will in the
future.
future. Right
Maybe
now,
in the
we don't.
future.
And it's something too that one of the things about the CE market, as Christy already said, there's 17,000 opportunities to
Yeah.
get continuing education.
There's a
There
lot
are
out there.
not 17,000 free opportunities, but there are ways, the IRS, you can get your CE through IRS webinars and events. And so this is something that, yes, I know that any CE that Christy does is going to be better than CE other people do, but there are a lot of opportunities out there. There's a lot of ways to get continuing education. That's good continuing education. That's not expensive. And so
Yeah.
maybe we will in the future. It's not something that, I mean, we kicked it around at times, but it's not something that we're, behind the scenes working on right now. But there's all kinds of opportunities out there.
I get asked a lot. I do get asked a lot. A lot of candidates will reach out to me privately, but there's only one of me. There's only one of me. And doing the updating is really demanding. I'll just put it that way. We like Brian mentioned earlier, we don't just change the years on the questions. We review everything. Everything gets reviewed. And it's over 1,000 pages of material and over 60 hours of webinars. So from January to April, we're really, really, really busy. So there's no way that I would be able to offer CE during those months. And many times that's when people look for CE, is because they want to get updates for the coming tax year. And that's not something that I would ever be able to manage and still update the enrolled agent materials at the same time. Like, I'm stretched really thin, everybody.
Well, and it's something too that, as I said, there's different ways to update materials. And Christy,
Yeah.
you do it. You update the materials, and they are. I mean, I've seen it in other exams. You just kind of roll it forward and hope nobody notices that it's not actually completely correct.
Notices. Yeah.
But I know, and I've seen the notes and stuff you work with, and so yes, it's updated. And that's a massive effort. Like Christy said, it's a lot of pages, a lot of hours, a lot of questions.
Yeah, it's a massive effort.
Yeah.
I think Brian was a little shocked.
Well, and I'll say
when I looked at something with track changes.
And this is just an example of, not only is Christy changing the year and changing the amounts, but I see in the questions, there's comments that we've changed this to make it a little more descriptive, or we've replaced this question with one that's a little bit better. And it's not just changing the numbers and the amounts, but it's looking at a question to see, can we improve this question? Can we make this question a little bit better? Can we fix, if there was something that was confusing and we need to put in another little clause? And so, yeah, it's a huge task. And Christy, I absolutely understand that from January to April, it's that, and then there's a little recovery time, and then it's starting to find out get ready to do the next one.
Those questions are just coming from love, Christy. I think people love the way that you present. Just reading the comments here, they love the way you present, and they want more of you, however they can get that. So thank you for that.
Yeah. So I love you guys too. Hearts. Love you guys.
Next, there the hearts come. Next big question. I guess there's a lot of questions here about EA versus CPA. And now my Alexa has started talking in the background here. Can you talk about CA or EA and CPA? Are they competitors? Do they go well together? How does that work?
They're not, I don't think that they're competitors. CPAs and attorneys, we always forget the attorneys, right? But CPAs and attorneys can do representation work before the IRS, just like enrolled agents can. So CPAs, enrolled agents, and attorneys have unlimited practice rights before the Internal Revenue Service. So it's not just the preparation of tax returns. A big part of what we do as enrolled agents is representing taxpayers before the Internal Revenue Service. And we're allowed to do that before every level of the IRS, which means examination, when they go through an audit, when they're already in collections, when they go through appeals, when they're delinquents, basically any possible scenario that you can think of. And that's the privilege that we have as an enrolled agent. CPAs also do audit work, right? They also can do audit work. They can sign off on financial statements. And to be honest, I actually sat for the CPA exam. I have all the credits, all the accounting credits that I need to sit for the CPA exam. I tried doing it when I was pregnant, which was a huge mistake, And I never liked audit work. It's the only accounting class where I got a C. I got A's and everything else, but I hated audit. And when I worked for my first CPA firm, the first CPA firm that I worked for, I still was thinking that I might become a CPA, but I hated audit so much, and I saw how the CPAs were always on what is it called? They would leave. They would have to leave to do the audit work on site. So they would be like, okay, we're going to go. I lived in Sacramento, which is the capital of California, for those of you who are not aware. And many of them would have to go to San Diego or Los Angeles, and they'd have to be down there for like a week, 10 days. And I'm thinking, I have a kid. I can't be doing this. I can't be on site at an audit for a week away from my kid. So I thought, I want to go into tax. And the funny thing is that CPA firm that I was working for was a mid-sized firm. I'm not going to name names, but that CPA firm that I was working for was a mid-sized firm, and they had, a couple dozen people in their audit department, and they always needed more auditors because the auditors wouldn't stay. They didn't want to be away from their families for 2 weeks, which is understandable, right? And they didn't want to hire anybody else for their tax side. And I wanted to work for tax, and they were never going to put me in tax because they wanted people to be doing audit work, which they never had enough people for. So that's when I decided that I was going to do tax because I didn't want to be traveling like that because I had a family. And once I became an enrolled agent, there was a lot of local work in Sacramento for me to do. I went on job interviews, and I had multiple job offers every single time. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to submit 100 resumes and only one person is going to call me back. No, I would submit 5 resumes and all 5 of them would call me back. So I want you to get an understanding that that's what it's like when you become an enrolled agent. The demand is there for your license. CPAs and EAs and attorneys have the same practice rights before the Internal Revenue Service, but it's more difficult. There's more hurdles to becoming a CPA. You have to pass the test, the CPA exam. But in order to get the license, you usually need a certain number of hours working under a licensed CPA in order to get the license. In California, the last time I checked, it was 2 years. It might be 1 year now. I haven't checked in a while because it doesn't apply to me anymore. I don't plan on becoming a CPA. I'm very busy already. But the last time I checked was 2 years in California. I think they dropped it to 1 year. But you have to basically work for that CPA firm and swallow everything that they give you for them to sign that paper before you can actually become a CPA. And with an EA, it's not like that. You pass the exam, you submit the Form 23, your fee, and if you're compliant on your taxes and you don't have felonies, there's a very good chance you're going to get your license in the mail 40 days later. So the barrier to entry is lower. It's easier, I think. You don't have to be slaving away for a business that that you don't want to work for in order to get a signature to become an EA. So, and the opportunities are the same. The opportunities are there.
Yeah. You just said it's easier, and in total it is, but somebody asked this question too. The EA exam is more difficult than the CPA tax exam.
Yes, that's true.
If your CPAs also have to pass audit and financial accounting,
yes.
But what is tested, if I had a tax question, I would contact an enrolled agent a long time before I would contact a CPA.
Yeah.
If I had a multinational corporation with tax questions in 17 different countries, I might go to a CPA firm
CPA
before I
first.
would call Christy and say, Christy, can you help me out with my 17 country tax issue? And so what is tested for an EA is more in depth and broader in scope than what a CPA tests to become a CPA.
Yes, that's true. The
Yeah.
tax exam for a CPA is only one part. And to be honest, when I was planning to become a CPA, the requirements were to just take one tax class. You only had to take one tax class. I took multiple tax classes because I actually enjoyed tax. And so I took multiple tax classes. I took corporate tax classes. I took partnership tax classes, but you didn't have to. And I feel like the EA exam, yes, is broader in scope when it comes to tax. It's 3 tax exams.
Well, and another way of looking at it is if you go to a CPA firm and sit in the lobby of a CPA firm and watch the clients come in, some are going to be tax clients,
Yeah,
audit clients, consulting clients.
exactly.
If you sit in an EA's office and watch the clients come in, it's all tax. There may be
Yeah.
different tax questions and different tax situations, but the person, nobody comes to the EA and says, I need an audit. And so working for an EA is, I mean, CPAs provide, and one of the advantages of a CPA firm is for a company, they can do the tax work and the audit work and the consulting work. If I have my small business, if I have my own personal tax question, then I don't need a CPA firm to do an audit. I just need somebody to help me with my taxes, and that's what the enrolled agent is going to do for me.
Okay, great. We have several questions that kind of talk about what does the EA lead to besides doing taxes? So could I become a financial advisor? Could I be a tax strategist? Could I be an educator, a faculty? What other roles might this lead to once I get my EA?
Okay, so when you become an enrolled agent, you don't just have to do tax. And there's a lot of enrolled agents that don't necessarily do tax. Some of them specialize only in representation work. They only represent taxpayers. Some of them do decide to teach. They will offer continuing education courses primarily. Many of them will work for even state agencies. They'll go to work for a state agency, like they'll work for the state of California, the Franchise Tax Board. They're always hiring. Many of them will become enrolled agents and then obtain an insurance license. Like they'll get Series 7. Is that what it is? Series 7 or Series 14 or whatever?
Could well be,
yeah. They'll start to sell insurance, or they'll start to sell stock. Many of them are certified financial planners, and then they become EAs because they want to do like holistic financial planning. It's really difficult to do holistic financial planning without understanding the tax aspects and dealing with the tax returns. So sometimes they'll be CFPs and become EAs on top of that, or the vice versa. They'll become enrolled agents and then become CFPs after that, certified financial planners. Or they'll get another, the EA can be a jumping off point to multiple licenses. The EA can become a jumping off point to multiple licenses, and it just depends on what you want to do.
There have been a couple questions about what if CMA plus enrolled agent, and part of it is, as Christy was saying, there's a lot of elements of tax, and I guess we've kind of been, maybe our default is to think of the taxpayer. Well, all the governments are collecting taxes,
exactly,
and they're auditing the returns, and so I'm sure every state, every municipality that collects taxes, there's the recipient of the taxes. And so like CFP, if you're in consulting and you understand the tax implications of, having tax knowledge is not a bad thing. It may add more value in some areas of work than others. And as Christy said, if you're a financial planner and you're giving people advice, it's really helpful if you know what the corresponding tax implications of that advice are, how the taxes impact the advice. And so it will never be harmful to your career. Depending on what you're trying to do, it may be more or less beneficial to you, but nothing harmful of having the knowledge and being an enrolled agent.
Exactly.
Okay, great. We have some technical questions. Are there limitations from Prometric about how many times you can take the exam in the year?
Yes. You can take the exam of each part up to 4 times in each exam cycle. I've never met anybody that had to do it that many times. Usually they'll pass it the second time around if they fail it the first time. But you could potentially take each exam part 4 times in each testing cycle. That's the maximum. So yeah, so you could take part 1, fail it, take it again, fail it, take it again, fail it, and then and then the 4th time. But honestly, I've never met anybody that had to take it that many times.
If you fail and your score is close,
yeah,
you should take it again as soon as possible. Keep studying. And if you fail it and your score is not close, you need to wait 4 months. You need to study again before you take it again. And so I could see 3 times, maybe.
Yeah, but even then, I've never when I've had candidates reach out to me. Part 2 is the one that they usually will fail the first time. But in all honesty, most of the time they will pass it the second time around, because the benefit of taking it and then failing is that you get a look at what the questions are like, and they give you a score report at the end. If you fail, they will tell you this is your weak areas, and you could just go right into the pass map and say, I'm going to study my weak area. They'll tell you, they'll tell you, okay, you're weak in this particular thing. Okay, tax credits, whatever. That's where you did poorly. And so you just go back into the pass map, you study tax credits for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then, you schedule the exam and you take it again.
Okay, great. Let's see. Can an EA attest to international taxes, or does that have to go through a CPA?
Attestation is not a function of the EA. That's a CPA. Attestation for financial statements? No.
Well, if you're talking about foreign taxes or financial statements, that's whatever that country's licensing or certification credentialing process is. And so CPAs legally don't really have any recognition in other countries. And so if you're talking about a tax question outside the US, you need to find the EA equivalent in that country to get advice and guidance on that.
Okay. Let's see. There's a question about AI in the world today. Are online tax tools and artificial intelligence going to threaten this industry?
I realistically, I don't think so. I'm being honest. I played around with Copilot, with ChatGPT. They're useful tools, I think, for writing fiction. I'm not even being facetious. I feel like they're useful tools for writing fiction, or when you want to clean up a letter, clean up an email, make it sound a little bit better. But for tax law, they are terrible. Absolutely terrible. And the reason why that is because the most authoritative source for tax law is the IRS website. And the IRS website is always completely out of date. They're always behind. The publications don't get updated every single year. Many times the publications are even wrong. That's why we talk about it in part 3 of the EA exam, that the IRS publications and forms are not substantial authority, because many times they're flat out incorrect. So, and it's also part of the reason why my job is so hard from January to April, because many times the IRS website is not updated. Like all of the, okay, for example, I'm going off into, into the deep end, but like, for example, with retirement plans, this particular year with retirement plans, Secure Act 2.1 or Secure Act 1.0 was passed in 2019. Then Secure Act 2.0 was passed by Congress more recently, and the IRS did not update the publication for retirement plans at all. So if you ask ChatGPT or Copilot, which is another AI, about retirement plans, they will not give you the correct answer. Come hell or high water, you're not going to get the right answer out of them. So no, I don't think it's going to be taking over our job anytime soon, because I don't think that the IRS website is going to be, the IRS is never going to get its act together. I mean, they haven't been able to since I started in this business. So, I mean, if a miracle happens and the IRS actually comes into the modern era, then maybe. But the IRS is still running like XP, Windows XP on a majority of its computers. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen, everybody. You don't have to worry about AI. You don't.
Well, that's also the question too. Who do you want to get your tax advice from?
Yeah.
A person, or here's my story. Tell me what to do. I mean, that's just not a.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, people can be wrong about taxes too, and many times they are, because it's difficult to keep up on everything. But I'm not. I don't think AI is going to take over your job, especially if you start doing rep work, because that's a human thing. Yeah, an AI cannot do rep work. You know, that's a human thing. You have to talk to that person, and then you have to intervene for them with the Internal Revenue Service. I mean, it's the equivalent of a trial lawyer. You're a robot is not going to be able to do that job. You have to go to court. You're going to be like cross-examining your witness or whatever. And that's how it is with the IRS too. You have to contact the IRS. You have to be representing that taxpayer. You have to intercede for them. And there's a human element there that's never going to be able to be replaced by a robot. Oh, hey, you know, IRS, I know this person is delinquent, but they broke their ankle, and or they've had like serious health issues, and we really need to get like an extension, and can you please, you know, stop collection activity for 60 days while I get this worked out? How is a computer going to do that? I just don't see that happening. There's a human element there, and you know, especially when you're doing representation work for clients, you're talking with the auditor back and forth like this.
Great. I know the session is going kind of long, so if people need to go, please feel free to do so. We will send a copy of this to everybody who is attending, but I do want to keep answering questions if that's okay with you, Christy and Brian.
Sure, it's fine.
Okay,
it's
great.
fine.
So I'm going to go back to finish Michael's question. So Michael works in the in the government. Will the EA allow him to work in other agencies, maybe the IRS or other agencies? Job, but it's non-tax.
Yeah, I think that it would be easier to maybe get a job on the tax side. Every state has a taxing agency. So I think it's easier to get a job on the tax side if that's what you really want. If you want to continue to work for government, I worked for government. I worked in the accounting department for a state agency for California. I was really bored though, and I left. So you can make more money working in private industry if that's what you really want. But if you want to stay with the government, I mean, sure, the EA can help you. Most EAs don't work for government because the pay is better not working for government. But if you want to work for government, you can.
And once you become an EA, there's that demand.
Yeah.
And there's people outside of government that are wanting to pay you to go work for them. So
yeah, I mean, just to give you an idea of what I mean, California has really aggressive state taxing agencies. Might be the most aggressive in the United States. New York and California are always like top 1 or 2 on the list. New York and California are both really bad. But California has a really aggressive FTB, which is the state taxing agency. Then they have the EDD, which is for payroll and employees. And then they also have the BOE, which is for sales tax. And I did an interview with an enrolled agent who just did sales tax representation. That's it. That's all he did. And he was inundated. Like he couldn't do anything else because he always had work. And like if you wanted to work for the BOE or the Franchise Tax Board, you certainly could. I'm sure that having the enrolled agent license would benefit you there, at least to get the interview and getting the job. But you know, there's a big difference between like making $42,000 or $45,000 for a state agency and making, you know, $39,000 or $40,000 from one sales tax engagement. Because you're defending this a corporation who now has sales tax nexus in California and has this huge assessment from one of the most aggressive sales tax agencies in the nation. So, you know, I feel like when you crunch the numbers and if you can make six figures as an EA, most of the time the salaries that you would make at a government agency aren't as attractive anymore. But certainly if you wanted to work for the state or the government, you could. And you know, one of the audits that I did when I was working for a CPA firm was a CPA. She was a younger lady, and she was a certified public accountant, and she was working for the IRS as a CPA, and she was doing business audits. And I was on the other side of that. I was helping to defend the client. But I asked her, like, what are you doing? What are you doing working for the IRS? You can make so much more money working in private industry. And she said, oh, well, I have 5 kids. So she had 5 kids and she was doing it for the health benefits. So, I mean, if there's a good reason why you want to do that, you know, for the health benefits, or you want the pension, or maybe you have a spouse that's already making good money and you don't need the extra money, then yeah, I think it's good. But you can make more money as an EA working in private industry.
I think along with that, can EAs also work with nonprofit organizations, NGOs?
Yes. And actually, there's several candidates that I've spoken to just recently that they became EAs because they were already working for a nonprofit as a director of that nonprofit. And the nonprofit was kind of floundering and they didn't know what to do with regards to their tax filings. Because if it's not a church, churches don't have to file the Form 990. But if it's not a church, then nonprofits have filing requirements, and the penalties are huge if the nonprofit doesn't actually get its filings in on time. So they have to file the Form 990. They have to have financial statements. They have to, you know, run payroll for their employees. Most of them do have employees. If they're any kind of nonprofit that's actually has, like, you know, normal size.
Doing something.
So yeah, they have to deal with everything that a business would have to deal with, including tax filings and payroll. And I've spoken with more than one enrolled agent where they became EAs because they were working for nonprofits and nobody else knew how to do any of that. Maybe they were the bookkeeper and they said, okay, well, I need to learn a little bit more about this in order to help the nonprofit that I'm working for. So yeah, you can work on the nonprofit side.
And business activities that the nonprofit does are taxable, right? So there is a nonprofit may have some taxable activities that would certainly be helpful if they got that right the first time.
And actually I belong to a group where the group admin is an EA. Her name is Michelle Brown, and she only does churches and nonprofits, and that's it. That's her specialty. Yeah. So she has a podcast. She does consulting for churches, and you'd think, well, the church doesn't have to file a Form 990, but yeah, they can have UBIT. Churches can have like unrelated business income if they have like a little shop, like a little bookstore, or if they rent their parking lots. Many times churches will rent facilities. They have all kinds of questions like that. And she does just that sort of consulting, and not nonprofits, but just churches. And she's very busy. So you can specialize in just nonprofits. You can specialize in just churches. And she's an enrolled agent, and she's very well known in that particular area.
Well, and there've been questions about how to start a practice and how to get a job with Big Four, but I would assume too that this woman who specializes in churches, that wasn't her plan. When she started
Maybe
doing
from the
tax
beginning,
work
yeah.
20 years ago, one of her clients was a church and she did something great for the church, and that church told another church. And
Exactly.
5 years later, she had more churches than she had time to do. And so all of those, I mean, any type of business that's a unique business, there are multiples of those businesses across the country. And once you become an expert for one of them, I know somebody not in tax, but he works as, does car dealerships and helps car dealerships sort out their accounting when they mess up. And
Yep.
so I'm sure there's a corresponding tax element of car dealerships and what they have to. And so, you know, you start your business, you hang out your shingle doing it, your EA, and 2 years later, you've kind of specialized in the same industry your biggest client is in, and you can then leverage that to becoming a specialist for the industry.
Absolutely.
So you don't plan it necessarily. She may have never planned to become a church expert, but that's what happened. And
That's what happens. You'll get like a couple clients, and then you'll find, okay, I'm good at this. I like this particular client, and then they'll start referring and referring and referring.
Yeah.
In one of my other groups, enrolled agent, she started out as like a little bookkeeper and got like a truck driver, semi-truck driver, and she became an enrolled agent. And then that truck driver just kept referring more truck drivers. So now she specializes in truck drivers. That's what she does. She does S corps for truck drivers, partnerships for truck drivers, it's all truck drivers. So that's almost her entire practice base. And yeah, you'll find a specialization, and there'll come a point, and probably sooner rather than later, where you'll find something that you like. And if you start advertising for that, like on Facebook, and say targeted ads, I specialize in truck drivers, or I specialize in churches, the people will come to you. The people will come to you.
Well, and this comes back to the fact that it's not a state license.
Right.
And so it doesn't matter where in the world you are.
Exactly.
If you're an expert in churches or sports coaches or whatever it is,
exactly,
you're able to provide that service to anybody anywhere who's paying U.S. taxes connected to that. And so, yeah, there's a lot of specializations, that you would never, that we could sit here and we would never think of all of them.
Yeah.
Because there's some unique little business.
I met one the other day. It was a gentleman, and he did like umpires, like baseball umpires, football referees. What is the guy in the boxing ring, the referee for the boxing ring? So he like specialized in that sort of thing, but just for like the referees and the umpires. So
if you're a referee and you work in multiple states, you may have tax liabilities in states, and I understand EA is not state tax, but that's how you become a specialist in terms of what state and it's something too, sales tax, once you create nexus somewhere. And so there's a consulting step helping people who have online businesses as they grow, and they end up with a tax nexus somewhere that they didn't recognize. And they need the representation to help deal with the sales tax in whatever state it is. And that becomes a business. You may not plan it, but that becomes a business that there's a need for.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, we have just a few minutes left, so I want to rapid fire through a few of the last questions. Otherwise, I think we can end up talking all day because we have such wonderful presenters with us here today. So, Christy, there's one that's been on here for a long time. Can an EA do their own tax report for themselves or their family?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, why would I?
You may not want to for your family.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I've gotten questions before where, do you have to put that it's self-prepared? I mean, because you have to fill out the preparer section. I just leave the preparation section. Maybe that's what they're asking. I just leave the preparation section of the tax return with all of my professional information. But yeah, I do my family's returns. I do my own tax returns. I do my children's tax returns. I do my own tax returns. Yeah, I don't. I
Doing
don't,
business with
I don't
family
hire
has,
other people to do my tax
when you
return.
start doing your relatives, there's other issues that may
Yeah,
may
exactly.
cause you not to want to do that, but
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can.
yeah. You
So
can,
Chris-
you can. I mean, you can, you certainly could hire somebody else if you want to, but why would you do that? Yeah,
Right.
I don't do that.
Right. Christy, as an EA, do you recommend attending IRS tax forums?
Um, I've done it before. The tax forums are a good place to like network and stuff if you go in person. You get to meet people, go to all of the events, go to as many events as you can. Network, go to like the little mixers and stuff that they have, and really try to get to know people and meet people. If you're doing it remotely, I think that there's other resources that are better. I'll just put it that way. There's other resources that are better where you're going to learn more. But if it's like a networking event and you want to go in person, the IRS tax forum is a great place to go. And to meet vendors, go into the little vendors and see the different software and all that other stuff. Yeah, if you go in person, yeah. Remotely, like virtual, no. I think there's other providers where you're going to learn more if you're going to do virtual. Okay. That's my answer.
Great, thank you. Where or how do you find updated IRS tax information if it's not posted?
It's hard. Yeah, like on the HOCK website, that's that's where you're gonna find it, because it's really hard to get all of the information updated. Yeah, the IRS doesn't always update its website on time. And what I do personally, when I'm researching the information for the updates every single year, is I have to use multiple sources. It's difficult. I have to cross-check the information that I have, because the last couple of years, especially, there's been a lot of retroactive tax law changes. Congress has been passing has passed a tax bill every single year since 2017. This was unusual in the past. I'll just say it that way. And it's very hard to keep up to date. The information on the HOCK website is up to date, and it's current and it's accurate. But I can't tell you that the IRS website is always going to be accurate. For myself, I use CCH Checkpoint, the tax book, Cal CPA, NATP, ASTPS. So I use at least half a dozen sources, and I'm always cross-checking in order to make sure that the information is accurate. I can't give you any one resource that I can say, this is the only thing that you should use.
Yeah, I would say follow Christy on LinkedIn if you don't.
Yeah.
So many great updates. I followed 10 more people that Christy follows just because they have such great information. And I'm not an EA tax person, but it's just beneficial knowledge.
Yeah.
All right. We have several questions that kind of say, okay, I get my EA. How do I get started? What do I do next? Should I go work for the Big Four? Should I start my own firm? Should I work for H&R Block? What is your best advice for somebody after they get their EA to actually get started?
My best advice is if you have no tax experience, is to work for a firm, is to just get a job with a firm. And you will get a job with a firm, and you won't have to try that hard to get a job with a firm once you become an enrolled agent. They will hire you. It's relatively easy. You can also work for a franchise. If you like working with people, with the general public, and you want to be busy all the time, not bored, a franchise is a great way to be busy all the time, because it's like the people sit down, you do their tax return while they're sitting in front of you, and there's a lot of turnover there, client turnover. If you want to do more advanced tax returns, it's better to work for a firm. You can learn how to do business tax returns. You can learn how to do individual tax returns. You can learn how to specialize. So you have to kind of really decide what you want to do. And once you become an enrolled agent, there's nothing there's really there's no limit to what you can do. You'll have 10 doors open in front of you and you just have to choose which door you want to go through. Does that make sense? But my recommendation is if you have no tax experience, to work for a firm. And if you already do have tax experience, like for example, if you are already working for a firm and you become an enrolled agent, then the next step is to learn how to do rep work, because there's a lot of money in that. And once you become an enrolled agent, you got to have a license first, though. You got to have a license first.
Okay. Two last ones. One, what are the beneficial tax tools to learn that go along with EA? And maybe along with this, are there other certifications or credentials, like somebody mentioned your ABA, that go along with becoming an EA?
Yeah, I have the ABA, which is Accredited Business Advisor, and that's like a state level exam. And actually, the ABA does qualify for public accountancy in 2 or 3 states, something like that. Two or three states that I've never lived in, because I've only practiced in California or Nevada. But there's other licenses out there that you can pursue once you become an enrolled agent. Certainly, you could become CFP, you could become a CPA, you could do anything you want. I feel like the enrolled agent is a good jumping off point, though, if you want to do tax. That's kind of where you should start. You could also become a QuickBooks Pro advisor. You could, get a license to sell insurance. There's all sorts of things that you could do where it can increase your practice offerings. You don't just have to do tax. There's other things that you can do too. You can offer, like, for example, the last CPA firm that I worked for, the CPA also offered like insurance products. You could do that too if you want to. You don't have to, but you can.
Are there any software systems or tax systems that are universal that somebody should know? I mean, there's
No,
QuickBooks.
there's
I mean, is there any
well,
software that I need to know?
Yeah, not tax software, but I think that it's a really good idea to take a good bookkeeping course.
Yeah.
Because you can't do corporations and partnerships unless you know how to do books. So there's a lot of resources out there to learn how to be like a QuickBooks Pro advisor, learn how to do payroll. Like Patriot and Gusto is usually who I recommend. I don't get any kickbacks from any of those companies, by the way. But like you could learn how to do payroll. There's like courses that you could take that are state specific. And there's a lot of money in payroll. It's kind of a drag because it's a monthly thing, so you can never get away from
it.
Yeah, you have to do monthly payroll or bi-weekly payroll, but there's a lot of people who use that as their bread and butter. I worked for a CPA firm in Roseville, California, where that CPA, it was a man, that CPA picked up like a restaurant chain that was like 4 or 5 restaurants, like family owned type thing. And he did all of the bookkeeping and the payroll for those restaurants because the restaurants had hired a bookkeeper and the bookkeeper had stolen from them. So the restaurant said, Tom was his name. Tom, can you do our bookkeeping and our payroll for our restaurants? And so he had that one huge client, and he actually hired an accounting student to work in the firm. And then I also worked for him. And this was like thousands of dollars every month for that one client. And that was all bookkeeping and payroll. And of course he had to do it every week or bi-weekly whenever the employees got paid. So you pick up a big client like that and you're basically making money all year round. You could work during the tax season, but you're making like $4,000, $5,000 a month off of one client. If you pick up like a chain, that's going to be payroll and bookkeeping. So it's good to learn that too.
And just off of that, if you, wherever you live, look at all the businesses, just you pass driving around.
Exactly.
All of those businesses have payroll,
Yep.
have tax, have sales tax, have estimated tax.
Bookkeeping.
And so a lot of those business owners have no desire at all
to do any of it.
to do that. And so every one of those, I mean, every business is paying taxes, or should be, or fine. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
and so I think one of the things is when we talk about consulting or auditing or tax work, we think of the huge multinationals.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, they have their own tax department, but every business, the landscaper who drives the truck down past where you work every day, there's a tax question there. And
Yep.
they may already have it solved. They may not know that they have a tax question yet. And so all of those small businesses, and so when you're just starting, those are all potential clients. And one of those little companies is going to have 6 branches in the next 2 years.
Exactly.
And if you're doing the tax work for those small businesses, and as they grow, your work, your scope, the volume you're doing is going to grow too. And so I think part of it is just a mind shift that we're not looking at Coca-Cola and McDonald's and Delta Airlines. There's a lot of businesses that, as you're starting your practice, are looking for you. They're not going to go pay a Big Four firm to do their taxes, but they'll pay you to remove that huge headache from their lives. And if you do it well, they'll tell their neighbor, they'll tell, I mean, all these small business owners talk to each other. And once you have a reputation as doing excellent tax work, the line's going to form because every little business wants that help.
Every little business, like Brian said, every little business, most of the time, the owners don't want to deal with the tax and the payroll and the bookkeeping. Sometimes they'll hire a bookkeeper, but they can't afford to have a full-time like CPA or enrolled agent working for their firm. They want you to help them when they need the help. So sometimes that translates into, okay, here's $450 a month, $500 a month. I'll balance your books every month, which takes you like an hour or two, and I'll run your payroll through Gusto or Patriot or whatever. You'll have like a wholesale account for an accountant. And there you go. There's your $500 or your $600 every month, because that's cheaper than hiring a full-time bookkeeper or a full-time accountant. And there you've started your client base. You get 4 or 5 of those, 5 or 6 of those little small businesses, every pet groomer, every car wash, every donut shop, every little business like that has employees, they need help with that. But they can't pay $50,000 or $45,000 to have someone on staff. So they're going to pay you $300, $400, $500 a month.
And those restaurant owners and landscapers, they didn't start their business because I'm an accountant who likes to do a restaurant.
Exactly.
They started their business because they like restaurants and they know nothing about accounting or taxes or anything connected to that. And so you're the expert in taxes. They're the expert in restauranting and landscaping and whatever their business does. And they need your service, and you do it well, you do it ethically, and in time, your client list grows. And like Christy said, you have enough clients that pay you $400 or $500 a month, and pretty soon that's a lot of money every month.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
Okay, I think with that, we will wrap up our session for today. I just want to thank Brian and Christy for your phenomenal information and all the attendees for your great questions. If you have more questions, please visit HOCK's website, hockinternational.com/EA, and you'll find the answers to many questions. If you still have questions, you can email us at support@hockinternational.com and we'll answer those for you. Follow Brian, follow Christy online, and we're happy to help you with your journey. But congratulations on taking this next step. And we wish
hearts.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. I love talking
Bye. Thank
to
you,
all of
everyone.
Okay.